Are we starting, Margaret?
Right, here we go. Hello everyone, and welcome to the book launch for Barbara Henderson's Scottish by Inclination. If you don't know Barbara already, I have to say that I've known Barbara for over 5 years, and Barbara is a force of nature. She absolutely is. She was one of the founders of Nest Book Fest, which is Inverness's very own book festival. And she combines her work as a drama teacher at a local primary school with a hugely productive career as a children's writer. Barbara was born in Germany, of course, but she's lived and worked in Scotland for many years and now considers herself Scottish by inclination, which just happens to be the title of the book we're here to talk about. So, Barbara, why don't you start by telling us a bit more of your story and about how the book came to be?
Right. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. It's just brilliant to see all your names popping up on the screen there. And I'm trying hard not to look because I'll be just so distracted by all these blasts from the past. Spotted Chris Keys in there, old university friend, Duncan Cuffell, who I've not spoken to for decades. Just amazing to have all that popping up. So I'm going to start by saying thank you to Margaret Kirk, who is a tartan noir writer, and her books Shadow Man, What Lies Buried, and In the Blood are well worth a read if you're interested in crime writing. And yeah, there are good reasons why Margaret was the woman for the launch and to chair it. first of all, she had such an interest in the book right from the beginning. And I am so grateful to her for reading an early draft, for encouraging me from the sidelines, for offering to proofread, the final drafts just before they went off. So I am just so grateful to her for doing that for me and for offering to chair this launch event as well. Fantastic. Thank you, Margaret. Also, massive thanks, before I forget, to Creative Scotland for providing some funding for me to be writing this book. That was a lifeline in the last year when all my event income sort of ground to a halt. Yeah, I just thoroughly enjoyed writing this book. And here it is. There it is. And in honor of this, I am wearing so shame that you won't be able to see this. But yeah, basically the book came together as a result of recent events, and the Brexit referendum sort of brought into sharp focus, I suppose, for me, the issues that we're facing, EU immigrants in particular. And I felt that those voices were missing a little bit, maybe from public discourse. And, it led me to just pitch the idea for a book of 30 profiles of EU nationals who had come to make their home in Scotland and had contributed to society here. And it was pitched as a non-fiction idea, just a sort of series of profiles. And really, I've got to credit Gavin McDougall of Luaf Press with the idea to actually combine that with an autobiographical element, which I had not planned. And actually, when he first suggested it, I said no. I said, actually, no, I don't think I'll do that. No, I don't think I'll write a book about myself. I'm not, I haven't lived nearly long enough to write a memoir. But as I started thinking about it, it felt like, I really only needed to cover the aspects of my life that were directly related to immigration and, being an immigrant to Scotland. And then it just sort of began to flow. And I thought, right, I'll give it a go. So the end result you see before you right here. And I am actually chuffed to bit. Huge shout out to Carrie for the gorgeous cover as well. Absolutely brilliant to see the finished product and to see especially all my wonderful interviewees, many of whom I've never met in person. Check out this picture section. It is incredible. So very pleased with that. So thank you. Massive thanks to all at Luaf Press as well for this.
Okay, so it must be quite a thought, given your amazing career as a children's writer. It must have been quite a thought to suddenly switch not only to non-fiction, but with non-fiction with an autobiographical element. How hard did you find that?
I suppose initially, I think I overthought it a bit at the beginning, to be honest. I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface of how to write for children well. I'm sort of learning continuously, and I'm constantly inspired by other writers who do that very, very well. I love writing for children. I love writing historical fiction, which is sort of my bread and butter stuff for young people. And I love going into schools, and it's a very different kind of being an author. So actually, I was like borderline nervous tonight for this book launch, because I thought I've never done this before, like an adult event with much more scrutiny. Kids, they are just carried away by a story. They love the adventure of it, and throw in a few sort of interactive bits and drama, and they're away. You know what I mean? With adults, I had it in my head that they would be a much more discerning audience, and I sincerely hope this isn't true. But yeah, I just thought it would be much harder for me to do that. I felt more daunted by it. But I guess if you're writing about yourself, you're sort of a world expert on that. Nobody can possibly argue with it, because it's your life. And I think once I'd got over this, like, this idea that if you're writing a memoir of any kind or anything autobiographical, that you sort of have to, include every detail and be accurate about everything, and, expose everything, the whole truth, what's and all, that daunted me. But actually, that very narrow focus of just going for immigration and, identity and belonging, and those kind of things that felt relevant to that for me, that was a lot easier. And actually, I felt like maybe I can do that. So I had a go. I wrote a couple of sample chapters just for myself, actually. And, I was able to sort of, reconnect with lots of other people going, what was this guy called again? And how did that work again? Do you remember this incident? And it was actually a lovely exercise in sort of reconnecting with some people from my past as well. So yes, it felt incredibly daunting at the beginning. And do you know what? I suppose I'm still to find out what it's like to be a writer for adults and to be
Yeah,
reviewed
yeah.
with that kind of scrutiny, and so on. But actually, I think the process was probably a little bit less terrifying than I had anticipated.
I can't actually imagine you being daunted by anything. But so one question I was keen to ask was, you've got a wonderful quote here from Donald S. Murray, who calls the book a wonderful compendium of voices. So could you tell us a little bit about the people in the video, and how you found them, made contact with them?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the core. The core of this book for me was amplifying the voices of EU immigrants to Scotland, particularly people who had made a really positive impact on their society, on their communities. And I was looking, so I sort of pitched it as a tweet initially, and it ran something like, 30 profiles of EU citizens in Scotland, Scottish by inclination, academics, artists, beer brewers, removal men, kind of a little list like that. I can't remember the actual wording. And so that came back clearly as something that would maybe be of interest to some publishers. So that was great to get a wee bit of initial interest in that. But of course, I had to then produce these people, and I hadn't really given that any thought at all. So I sort of begged, a few people who I knew to be very well connected in international circles. So there's Professor David Worthington of the University of the Highlands and Islands, who we both know. He's a great guy and unbelievably well connected with academics and all
Yeah.
sorts of interesting people. So he was my first go-to. Said, do you know anybody? And he gave me a huge list of people who I could maybe approach. So my friend Jennifer Robertson, who's a writer, again, incredibly well connected in the international community. So she gave me a few more suggestions. She asked her friends and her sister, and assorted people came back with, oh, I hear you looking for these kind of people. How about this dude? How about this lady? So I did that and contacted them, but I was really keen to represent everybody across the EU. So all the countries, I wanted them represented. So it's much easier to find Germans or French people or Italians working in Scotland than it is to, find a willing Estonian or, somebody from Lithuania or Latvia, or some of the smaller, Luxembourg. So
Yeah.
it took me a while. But I am absolutely delighted with all the people I've got on board. It's such a great range. A GP working right up on the north coast of Scotland. Andreas, I think you're here. Then we've got, an artist, Lotte Globe, of international renown with her ceramics and her sculptures. Unbelievably sort of impressive lady, and so long her stay in Scotland, she's absolutely in with the bricks, much longer than my 30 years here. So and then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got some people who are relatively recent arrivals, but entrepreneurs and high achievers, both in academia and in all sorts of other areas. I found social media was probably the quickest way. LinkedIn, I hadn't really invested much time in my LinkedIn profile, but boy, did I make an effort for this book just to connect with all these people. And it's a massive testament to them that they agreed to, to be approached and to trust me with their stories, because I am telling their story, and they had to trust me to get it right. And I really sincerely hope I have. But no, thank you to all of them who are here. I can see loads of them, my goodness. Daniela, Lorenzo, Andreas, Maria, so many people who are here and who supported this project from the beginning. Sorry, Margaret.
That's okay. No, I was about to say that's a very good place to start with. I think your first reading, take us right back to the beginning,
Yeah.
to your arrival in Scotland, if you would.
Thank you. So the first reading is I don't know, hopefully not too long, but it'll take you to the moment when I arrived in Scotland. So I was a student. I left school in Germany and I applied to a Scottish university to study for my full degree because that was the first year that the EU had agreed to fund. A full degree of fees. So I didn't have to pay tuition fees at that time. And I decided to give it a go and apply for my degree here. So I'll read the chapter called Arrivals right at the beginning of the book. You'll recognize him, he's really tall, Louis said. I raised my eyebrows. He'll be there, don't worry. I was still unconvinced. How will I recognize him? If I've never seen him, do you have a photo? My friend Louis shook his head and giggled as if suddenly struck by a thought of pure genius. Look, he's called Fergus McNeill, right? And when we worked together in London, he used to really like this song, Celebration by Kool and the Gang. That can be your signal. What? To me, an uninitiated German about to move to Scotland for the duration of my degree, Louis was the nearest thing to a native, a Londoner, albeit jobbing in Germany, but with a host of useful connections. One of these, his friend Fergus, was to pick me up from Glasgow Airport, drop me at his parents' house overnight, and then see me onto some sort of transport to Edinburgh the morning after. Simple and straightforward, but this was Louis. Sing this song. That way he'll definitely know it's you, Louis winked. I decided to leave it. After all, I didn't want him to think that the wind-up was working. Barely a week later, I'd done the necessary. Guitar and gargantuan backpack stored in the plane's hold, I sat in my seat on the edge of the atmosphere and cried. I cried for the parents I'd left behind, for my sister about to give birth, for the enormity of my decision, and for the country disappearing under clouds beneath me, which would no longer be my home as soon as I touched down on Scotland's rain-soaked asphalt. It was dusk. The businessman beside me pushed his way into the queue. In fact, everyone who had dozed and lazed their way through the flight was suddenly in a rush, except me. Like the landing jolt, it struck me. I wasn't just scared of going. I was scared of arriving. What had possessed me to want to come here? Guitar and backpack reclaimed, I shuffled through the exit gate. For all these complete strangers knew, I was naturally puffy-faced and red-nosed, and I had more important things to worry about anyway, finding Fergus. I scanned the crowd, already grinning, thinning with greetings and departures. A couple of men were tall, I guessed. I sauntered past them both. Neither of them paid me the slightest bit of attention. Waiting alone in an arrivals lounge late at night in a strange country, I began to panic until it struck me. Stroke of genius, Louis, very funny. He's primed Fergus not to declare himself until I took a deep breath. So be it. Picking my guitar up, I sauntered past the first tall man, who had sat down by now, humming with ever-increasing volume as I passed. Mm, 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 mm. He looked up, but not with recognition, with something else I'd rather not think about. I decided to give the other man a try, even though he was now hugging an elderly woman who'd been on the plane behind me, singing timidly now, Celebration. I'm ashamed to admit I even sang the guitar riff which follows. Both tall men disappeared down the emptying arrivals lounge, but come to think of it, Louis was very small. Maybe to him almost anybody would be tall. Nothing for it. Celebration. For by the time I heard loud footsteps echoing, I was pretty much singing out all my desperation at top volume. A ridiculously tall young man ran into the hall, where by now only a few people milled around, most of them cleaners, and a singing German student. he'd gone to the wrong gate by mistake. Almost 30 years later, this country has become my country. I have arrived. And if you recall a very odd time at Glasgow Airport where a dishevelled teenager spontaneously burst into song, maybe now you understand.
Wow, I am completely in awe of the bravery that you could display, having just arrived in a foreign country, to break into song and accompany yourself. The bravery of youth, obviously. I love it. I absolutely love it. So, and now 30 years later, and you've taken British citizenship. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I guess one of the questions, I'm not going to ask it because I think it's really rude, but I have seen on Twitter, I've seen other people talking to other EU nationals saying, why did you wait so long to get citizenship?
Do you know the simple answer to that? I just didn't have to, because
Yeah.
until then, I was in home territory. We were all in the EU. We were all allowed to move freely, and I didn't have to. I should also say that for a long time, Germany didn't allow dual citizenship. And,
Uh-huh.
so I was immediately put off by that. I didn't want to lose my German citizenship in order to become British,
Yeah.
because I had aging parents on the continent, and I was, it's my identity, it's
Yeah.
my background, and I'm not just going to kiss that goodbye.
Yeah.
So I suppose really the Brexit referendum forced my hand. I
Uh-huh.
did apply for settled status fairly early on, but something that a friend of mine said, a fellow writer, actually an American, Elizabeth Ween, she said the only way you can be sure of anything is to be a citizen. So I suppose I took the hit, and I paid
Yeah.
out literally thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
decided that speed was of the essence. The Germans had by then said that they would only allow dual citizenship if you had applied before the Brexit cliff edge at the
Yeah.
very end of last year.
Yeah.
So, this application had to go, and it had to go right then. And yeah, so I got my results through, and I am now a British citizen, although I haven't actually applied for the actual passport yet. That's yet more hassle and money, but I guess I'm
Just
nearly there.
what's the process? Take us through the process of gaining citizenship.
So, I decided early on that I was going to I was going to need help. I was not trusting myself to be so meticulous. I'd heard of plenty, horror stories where people who'd been in this country for decades had their citizenship application denied. And I knew I had one shot at this, because of the ticking clock and the Brexit deadline. So I needed to succeed with my dual citizenship immediately. So I actually asked around for, whether anybody knew a lawyer who was willing to take these kind of cases on. And I found a lovely lady in Glasgow, and she just held my hand throughout the whole process. So I vividly remember scanning every payslip from 2011 until 2021, for example. Would you be able to produce all these payslips? I had a couple missing, but we just had to hope for the best. The form itself isn't too daunting, I suppose, but it was all the supporting paperwork, where you could just fall down so quickly. You had to give every date when you left the country. So, I was scrolling back through old email accounts, checking when I'd left the country, old bookings, old confirmations of flights and so on, just to make sure that I got everything exactly right. And I'm just so delighted that I've got through it. So yeah, it was a virtual citizen ceremony, and the only people there were me and the registrar. But it felt like a thing, and I guess now I'm British, but I suppose it was a pragmatic decision. I didn't feel like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
needed to be British. I needed to be absolutely certain that nothing could ever separate me from my family, and that's the reason I did it. And I'm
And
sure that.
you actually had to travel to Glasgow, is that right, to take the
Oh,
test?
several times, yeah. So there's the Life in the UK test, of course, which, Margaret, I'm going to go and test you and all you guys who are assembled here. You know, we're going to just give you a little flavour of some of the questions that you have to revise and that you'll be asked. So yes, I had to pay for a biometric appointment in Glasgow, which was the final thing. So that was a separate journey to the citizenship test. So yeah, several drives from Inverness to Glasgow, and you know, I just felt like it wasn't a massively user-friendly service. It wasn't weighted towards us for ease, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, shall we have a go? Is it possible to have the presentation up? Fantastic. Right, Margaret, here we go. The Life in the UK test. I've only got 5 questions here, one for each year since the EU referendum. You guys test yourself and let us know in the chat function afterwards what your score was. So your top score could be 5. Let's see. Who built the Tower of London? Was it Henry VII, William the Conqueror, Henry VIII, or Oliver Cromwell? Who was that, Margaret?
I think, because certainly parts of it are very early, I think it was William the Conqueror.
Okay, so Margaret says it was William the Conqueror. The next question up, please. When was Charles I executed? I love this one, actually, because, you know, the dates are so close together. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Was it 1646, 1653, 1649, or 1658?
Definitely wasn't 58, because we're getting close to the Restoration. I'm going to go for 49.
Oh, interesting. I'm liking Andrew's comment. Can we just agree it was 5 p.m.?
Yeah.
What percentage of the UK population does not follow a religion, Margaret? 17, 19, 14, or 21%? What do you think?
I'm going to say it's quite high. I think I'm going to say 21.
Ooh, interesting. And the next question 4 here, what did the Chartists campaign for? The right to vote for women, the right to vote for the working classes, the right to vote for 21-year-olds, or the right to vote for 18-year-olds?
Now, the Chartists were definitely a working class emancipation type movement. So I'm going to go for a little right to vote for the working class.
Oh, man. And right, so let's have our final wee question here. When did the first Christian communities arrive in Britain or appear in Britain? Is it the 3rd and the 4th centuries, 4th and the 5th centuries, or is it the 2nd and the 3rd centuries, or the 1st and the 2nd centuries?
I know that they certainly began to be established in the 6th century, so I'm going to say 4th and 5th.
4th and 5th is your answer. Well, can I break it to you that the answers are as follows? So the Tower of London was built by William the Conqueror, although somebody in the chat function is right that other things were added on later. Yeah. I should say that the Chartists campaigned for the right to vote for the working classes. Oh, we're going back through again. Charles I was executed in 1649. You got that right. Okay, the next one, please.
Oh, I got it right.
Yeah, what percentage of the UK population doesn't follow religion? You're right, it was 21%. Next one.
Hey.
What did the Chartists campaign for? I've given it away. Working classes should vote. Brilliant. And then when did the first Christian communities appear? This one caught you out, Margaret, because it was in fact the 3rd and the 4th centuries. But actually there were other questions in there. I don't know, I'd love to know how the rest of you got on in the chat. How many of you got 5 out of 5? How many of you are too embarrassed to admit what you got? But it's fair to say I had to really swat up to learn all these answers. You know, would you know where the National Horse Racing Museum is, for example? Apparently it's in Sussex. I had to learn that. Who or what is Clarice Cliff? Never heard of her. And she's an artist, isn't she? But I didn't know that. Yeah. How many visitors? Sorry, is a youth pod in England open to the public? Don't know. Is it? How many people sit on it? I don't know. You know, I had to learn all of these things. Well done, Georgina, 3 out of 5, but guessing. 3 out of 5 seems to be common. 2 out of 5. I know it is a little bit. There are so many things in there that just feel like they're not entirely relevant. And you know what? I was sitting beside this poor lady who was in tears before she even went in. She was clearly from an Arab background. Her English was limited, and she clearly hadn't actually spent, the first half of her life in Western Europe. There were so many questions in
Yeah.
there that were easier for me because I was used to studying history. I had a broad context for,
Yep.
what had happened in Europe. I had cross-referencing in my head. I had a university degree. How easy would it be for somebody like her? And on the way out, she confided in me that she had failed it 6 times and she was now resitting it for the 7th time. And my heart just went out to her, regardless of my own result. I just thought, how much harder is this for you than it is for me? And how are we weighting the whole system in order to favor people with degrees, people with higher education, people who are rich and can afford to travel to these tests, people who have cars and are able to get themselves to these places with ease, essentially people like me. And I felt pretty guilty, I've got to say, despite the fact that I was elated I got through.
Yeah.
I think we're making it very hard. It's a
very
system.
Yeah, it's very hard to escape the conclusion that this is by design. It's deliberately as hard as possible. I mean, yeah, I got 4 out of 5. I know a bit about history. I'm British born. Why make it so hard for people? I will give a small rant here. I'm not at all impartial in this. My degree was in French and German. I lived in Germany for a while. My ex-husband is German, so my daughter is half German. And being European has always been such a part of my life, I suppose. And it just seems ridiculous that we are forcing people who have lived here, have worked here, our friends, our colleagues, and they're having basically to prove their worth, prove that they should be allowed to stay here. I cannot. I change between being really sorry and pleased that people have got through it and absolutely enraged. And of course we're here and on special night for your book, but also it's the anniversary of that referendum. So how was that night for you?
Well, it's probably easiest if I just do the reading, Margaret, because that's probably going to put it slightly better than I would ad-lib it. So, I think that because of the Brexit referendum and the ensuing kind of consequences, the thing that bothered me the most about it, to be honest, was the fact that I didn't have a say, despite having been in Britain, paying my taxes, not claiming benefits, and to the best of my ability, trying to make a positive difference in my community. And I didn't have a say. I wasn't allowed to vote. And I think many of us here tonight who are EU citizens would echo that. There was a sense of powerlessness, but also, if I'm absolutely honest, I was complacent. I did not expect what came my way, and I think I wasn't alone in that. But anyway, let me just read the chapter. I did actually read it on YouTube earlier, so massive apologies if you've already heard this. But this is the chapter sort of towards the end of the book, called The Brexit Referendum. The June morning sun swirled through the glass. I fumbled to switch off my alarm and blinked hard before swinging myself out of bed. As the only early riser in our family, and even that label is worn half-heartedly, I staggered downstairs and clipped the dog on the lead. The morning dog walks are mine, generally. In the evening, I wilt like a daisy, and the thought of heading out into the inevitable lashing rain fills me with dread. No, I'd rather take the morning hit. There are a variety of routes around our neighbourhood in Inverness. It becomes an autopilot exercise, except for that morning. Hello, shouted a man from 2 streets along. Big day today, huh? My brain was still doing its morning stretches. What? Why big day? Brexit? He shook his head. He was a fellow German, a forester, who had lived here almost as long as I had. His wife had taken Bedchild to our German group years ago. Aren't you worried? He wanted to know. Why would I be worried? I didn't think I knew a single person who supported Brexit, and surely Nigel Farage by himself couldn't win a referendum. No, not worried, I declared blithely. Ah, he said with his trademark smile, I'm not so sure. I walked home more slowly than I had set out. Really? Was it even remotely possible that the country would vote to come out of Europe? The pictures of endless lines of Eastern Europeans queuing up to get into Britain had been discredited. The 300 million a week for the NHS claim had been a fabrication of the Leave campaign. No, I thought, people can see through this. I watched Indonesians stand in line outside the polling station at the end of our road, but I didn't join them. As a European citizen, I had no right to vote in a UK referendum. That in itself was unsettling. As EU citizens here, we were the ones whose lives would be most drastically affected, and yet on this issue, we were silenced. I had no voice in the decision the country would make that day. I valued the institution immensely. The EU had made free movement possible for people like me, enabling us to work, live, and study wherever we chose. Now I had to trust those around me to value it too, and I did. In the run-up to the day, it was hard not to take some of the debate personally. Several acquaintances had expressed surprise that this referendum had anything to do with me. We don't mean you, obviously, they said, not people like you. People like me, who lived and worked here, claimed no benefits and contributed to society by volunteering and looking after their local communities? Well, that was a little rich. The point was, if we left the EU, people like me wouldn't be able to come in the first place. Of course, I recognized that not every person who supported Brexit had a personal vendetta against immigrants, but in the rhetoric, it felt like a driving force. In the evening, there was a real sense of occasion on the BBC. Polls have now closed for the referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union, announced David Dimbleby, the veteran journalist who, entertainingly, once had to miss question time because he had been knocked unconscious by a bull on his Sussex farm. We expect the first results to come in at midnight. Rob and I exchanged a glance across the sofa. Are we staying up? I asked. Rob hesitated. It was a Thursday, a school night. He'd have work the next morning. For a bit, he mumbled. The unspoken words hung in the air. We'll watch until we're sure there's nothing to worry about. We'll see how it's going. We brewed some strong coffee, gently coaxed the teenagers upstairs, and made ourselves comfortable. I brought a duvet down from the bedroom. There was much speculation. Interviews with focus groups and interested commentators only part held our interest. The footage of students sprinting across sports halls with ballot boxes was much more like it. It felt like a Hollywood blockbuster, but hopefully one which was going to finish with a satisfying outcome. We expected to be safe, in a roller coaster sort of way. You take your seat and strap in. For a moment, the illusion of danger sends your heart rate soaring, but you're never in danger, not really. We began to shift uncomfortably as result after result was shared. True to my expectations, Scotland voted comfortably to stay within the European Union, but it was a different story in England. At around 1 o'clock, Rob decided to go to bed. I can't watch anymore, he said. I stretched myself out on my own and wrapped the duvet tightly around me for comfort as I saw the world I knew crumble. Had I ever known this country at all? Who were these people who wanted to stop immigration at all costs? Who around me had been in on the plan? I drifted in and out of the nightmare. At 4:40 a.m., On the 24th of June 2016, a tired-looking David Dimbleby announced, "The British people have spoken, and their answer is, we're out." I woke Rob to let him know. A couple more hours of sleep were wishful thinking. The days which followed were a strange blur, a hangover of scrambled thoughts and tearfulness. I was mortified to find myself crying on an elevator in the local shopping centre. Who of you voted for this? I wondered as I looked across the throng of shoppers. We don't mean you, not people like you. It's not personal. From where I was standing, the decision felt very personal indeed.
Yeah. I think a lot of us were stunned that morning. I think we were all in shock. I thought that was a very interesting line. Did I even know this country at all? It must have been. It must have felt like that. It must have felt like, have I been here for years and not really understood the mentality and mindset of certain people?
I think it really sort of, sorry to interrupt, but it really kind of highlights, what bubbles we mix in, and actually up to a point what social media does, because essentially if you share something of a certain political leaning on social media, they feed you more of the same stuff. So you're essentially, moving along thinking everybody thinks like you. And I think I was caught out by that. I found that very, very interesting to see that clearly there were people who thought very differently. But I think this is something that was echoed. I remember Lina's extract. Lina is one of my interviewees from Sweden, Lina Langley, a literary agent, and she describes exactly the same, looking around on the bus, thinking, who voted which way, who wanted me out, people like me out. I think it's really interesting. It makes you question everything. Anyway, sorry, Margaret.
No, I suppose the next question, I'm interested why you decided to write about it now. Did you feel you needed that distance from the referendum before you could sort it through in your head, before you felt able to write about it, for example?
So Maria, one of my other interviewees, she's here tonight, Maria de la Torre, she organised an actual sort of protest. And it wasn't immediately after the referendum, it was a little bit later, but it gave us a chance to celebrate the EU on a significant anniversary of that organisation. And I just remember looking around and being blown away by the talent and that interesting range of people who were there, even just in a small place like Inverness. It wasn't a huge crowd. Crowds were much bigger elsewhere. But I suppose that was the kernel of the idea, and it sort of stuck with me. And I think in the end it was a gut reaction to an opportunity to tweet ideas for books, the Expo North Pitch, which allowed you once a year to pitch ideas, and Scottish publishers would look. And I pitched all my unpublished children's books that were still sort of looking for a publisher. And I thought, here's this idea that's been sort of cooking around in my head for some time. I'll just pitch it. And there were a couple of publishers who actually got in touch and said that they'd be interested in discussing this. So in the end, Lua saw the process through and gave me a lot of support, a lot of belief in that idea. And, it came from there, really. The pandemic helped because it really focused my mind. I couldn't do school visits. I needed to find something else to do, ideally something that would come with a little bit of funding or payment. And this, Lua assured me, and again, I wouldn't have thought of that myself. They said, this is a fundable book. You might get some funding for this if you approach an organisation like Creative Scotland. And I did, and it was a top tip. So thank you very much for that.
Okay.
So yeah, the distance helped, I suppose, but it certainly wasn't something that I really consciously thought through.
And how do you feel about it now? Have you come to terms with it, and what?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody else. I think I say that in my postscript. I feel that it's a regrettable thing that happened. and I was angry at various parts. And there are still times when I feel angry. You know, I feel that, you know, even people who voted for Brexit actually maybe feel now that, you know, what they were sold at the time wasn't what they got. So, but you know, I've got to be careful around that. People are absolutely entitled to their own opinion, and you know, some of my best friends, you know, are still my best friends, even though they voted a different way. So I'm never going to walk away from a friendship or from somebody who you know doesn't agree with me. Um, and I think we're resilient. We're a resilient bunch. People in general are resilient, but these EU citizens have really proven that over the last few years. You know, you just muddle through because, you know, your life is your life. And I think there comes a point when you don't define yourself anymore by what other people call you. I vividly remember, and I do write about this in the book, the first time that, you know, on a television program, somebody referred to me as a Scottish author, because I simply hadn't gone out of my way to announce to them that I was not born in Scotland. You know, as far as they were concerned, I wrote Scottish historical fiction, and I was obviously a Scottish author. And I thought, will I go all out to correct that? Or, you know, am I a Scottish author? And I think in the end, you know, you reach that point where you've got to choose yourself to belong. And I reached that point then. I just thought, you know what? That's the end of it. I'm just not going to be, you know, dancing through hoops here to try and you know, define myself as other people do, or explain myself to others constantly. You know, yes, I am Scottish. I'm Scottish by inclination, and that'll do for me.
You
And they
absolutely are.
and the title came from there, from that moment of recognition that maybe in order to belong, I didn't have to be told that I could. You know, maybe I could just choose to belong. And I think all the others here have done the same, and we'll all be okay. So that's my
Right,
firm belief.
right. Let's see if there. I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions from the audience. So let's see who has a question for you.
Brilliant. Please do ask me lots of questions.
Wow, a lot of questions. Let's
Are
see.
there actually? Oh, brilliant.
Ah, that's an interesting one from Maria de la Torre. I wonder how many people of those you interviewed knew they were going to stay, or was it by accident
I
that they stayed?
I am. I think a lot of people I interviewed did have some sort of roots here. I remember Sven in particular, my very first interviewee, right at the beginning of the book, and he's here tonight, Sven Berna. So he said that actually one of the things that made a difference to him was, you know, getting the letter from the Scottish government. Saying, you know, we want you to stay, and we want to just reassure you that you're very welcome, and that we will put everything in place to help as best as we can. And, you know, while I can see how some people would see that as a wee political stunt, and it maybe was up to a point, but, you know, it meant a lot to quite a few of us. So that helped. You know, I think I'm not aware of anybody out of my interviewees who had decided to leave or whose leaving was imminent. Although obviously
Right.
people's lives change, their
Yeah.
situations change. um, I think I was particularly interested in talking to people who actually had committed or wanted to commit to Scotland, certainly for this, you know,
Yeah.
phase in their lives. And those, for me, made the more interesting interviewees. Great question. Thank you, Maria.
Right. Let me see. Sorry, quick scrolling here.
I'll take a drink of water. That's fine. I've got some of Petra's beer. Petra is a beer brewer, and she's featured in the book. So I'll probably celebrate with that later on. But that's hopefully after Germany have won their match tonight.
Here's another interesting one. This is from Kathy Ashley, and she says, you mentioned selecting for your book people who've made a contribution or a positive impact. I think we may have covered this after the test, actually. Do you think the bar is higher for immigrants? Is there no room in Scotland for ordinary people? Do you think immigrants always have to prove themselves?
I think there's definitely, and actually one of my interviews, Xenia talks about this, about, that constant need to feel, whether that's perceived or real, that somehow you need to be even better than anybody else to kind of make, I vividly remember this when I went for interviews for my first teaching post. So I had an English literature and language degree from Edinburgh University, but it wasn't my first language. I had trained as a teacher, and I was going to go into secondary schools and teach these kids, for their hires, for their qualifications, things that would impact their lives. And I thought, am I ever going to get a teaching job? I'm going to have to be better, than anybody else. And that was probably largely in my head, because in the end, that question was never asked. So, you know, I don't know, perhaps there's the balance between perceived and real. But I do think that, by the citizenship tests, we're sort of certainly, I don't know, shoehorning the sort of right people in and barring the way for others. And that doesn't feel fair to me. In my interviews, I really try to go out of my way to, some of them absolutely are award-winning, top-earning, amazing entrepreneurs, or, outrageously clever academics. But actually, we also have people who live what I would call, quieter lives, who have a job and a family, and, who in their own very small, quiet way are making an amazing difference in their community. And, I wanted to include all kinds. But yeah, that's why in my initial pitch, I pitched with the word removal man, because, I'd met a French removal man who was just the cheeriest person I'd ever come across. And he left an impression. I didn't manage to track him down for the book. I would have loved to talk to him. So, yeah. Any other questions? That's great. Brilliant question.
This is fascinating. From Christina, one of Barbara's questions to the participants was, if Scotland was a person, what would you tell her? I'd love to hear your.
Yeah, interesting, because that was a question I asked every one of my interviews. That was one of the questions that I always finished on. And for some of them, the question really sort of, it was like a button, and it started flowing and they had lots to say, and others were a little bit more unsure. So it didn't go in for everybody. And absolutely honestly, I would say thank you. But I would also say wake up. I would also say we can do better. I would say try again, try together. There are lots of things I would tell Scotland, and it varies probably from day to day and from moment to moment, depending on what's big in my head at the time. I am very grateful for the inclusive society that I appreciate here around me. I feel that there are supportive people all around me. But then at the same time, I would very much hope that I am a supportive person to other people. And I think that's how society rolls, doesn't it? These people here who've agreed to talk to me, and I really hope you all saw the rolling slideshow at the beginning, because that's where all their faces are, all their brilliant faces, which you can also see in the picture supplement here. Inside the book, these guys make Scotland, and we'll do that together. Both those born in Scotland and those born out with, and wherever that is, be that England or Wales or the EU or, America, wherever you've come from, if you're in Scotland, you're part of it, that warp and weft, and we make up Scottish society. Some threads are a bit brighter than others, shine a bit more obviously, but we all make up that society between us.
That's very true. So just to finish, a quick question from me. What next for you? You're still teaching, you're still writing. Do you see yourself moving into adult fiction, more non-fiction? What's next for you?
I think I will leave adult fiction to you, my friend. You do that one very well. No, I think I am. This is, I wouldn't. It's not a blip. It was a book I really wanted to write. It's something that I feel very strongly about, and it's important to me. And yes, I probably will write some more adult non-fiction. A couple of things potentially in the pipeline with that. But no, my bread and butter will be children's fiction. And I love doing school events. I really enjoy combining teaching with school events and festivals and so on. And I think that's going to be my bread and butter stuff if, you know, I'm allowed to carry on. Do you know what I mean? I think I have just been so fortunate. I've got brilliant publishers, massive, massive shout out to Cranachan Publishing as well. I think Anne said that she might come tonight, so I don't know if she's here or not. But, you know, just the person who gave me my first chance, you know, as a children's author, and who's stuck by me for 6 books, you know, that says a lot about somebody. And yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate with both my publishers, so massive thank you to them all. But no, children's books are where my heart is, and young people are what I want to spend my time with. So yeah, that's where I'm going to stay.
Right. Well, whatever you do, I'm sure you will bring your incredible energy and commitment to it. And speaking as a native Scot, we're lucky to have you and people like you. And I hope you continue to stay here and be Scottish by inclination.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Massive thanks to everyone for coming. It just felt like such an occasion. And incredibly brilliant to see all your faces just represented, even though I can't see the actual faces. It's so wonderful to know that you're there. So this is a book I commend it to you. It would mean the world to me if some of you could review it, if you have read it, even if you wanted to review it on that big site that we don't want to talk about. You know, even though you might not buy it from there, you can buy directly from the publishers. You know, it should hopefully be in Waterstones and other booksellers, and most of the independent booksellers have been brilliant so far. So I really hope that you'll be able to get hold of it if you want to. And thank you so much for showing an interest in my wee book. Thank you, Lua.